He brought some other stuff by, but then it was also just sort of there as supervision and moral support, which mostly equated to him drinking beer and then being like, "Oh yeah, you should do it this way instead." So I own a now 318,000 mile first generation Acura NSX. Part of the fun that both my wife and I have with our NSX ownership experience has been traveling around the country to the various places that host NS Expo, which is the NSX Club of America's annual event. NS Expo 2021 was going to be it was billed as being in Portland. Really, it was just outside of Portland because nobody wanted to really be in Portland at that point in time. My wife and I decided that, hey, we're gonna have fun with this. We're gonna take our time and drive our NSX, our 92 NSX from East Tennessee, where we live, out to Portland, Oregon. We're going to take the scenic route. It took us 5 days to get there. I know the cannonball aficionados watching this are looking at us like a bunch of filthy casuals, but we were taking the tourist approach. So we took the long route. We kind of drove up a little bit further north than we needed to, across, may visited an abandoned racetrack in Iowa for the fun of it, because that's what we do, and then made our way on further out west. This isn't the first time we've taken a long trip like this, and we've got a pretty decent record. I'll knock on wood as I say this. We've got a pretty decent record with avoiding mechanicals along the way. I try and be fastidious about the maintenance on the car, given its mileage. Stuff has worn out, some stuff more than once at this point. I try and keep on top of that, and most of the time it works. We've done cross countries to San Francisco and back, but this time our luck a little bit ran out. We got to, if you could define the middle of nowhere in Wyoming, this is where our story really kind of begins. And we had stopped for the night at a small town, just big enough to have a normal chain hotel that we could probably trust for a consistent night's sleep product. And we came out in the morning. I did a quick pre-flight check and kind of walked around the car, popped the hatch, checked the oil, because we'd cracked out 9 hours of straight driving the day before. And the engine, even at where we were at 290 something thousand miles at the time, really didn't use much oil, but I always checked it anyway. And in the course of doing this, I had noticed there's this weird shmoo on the opposite side of the engine from the dipstick. And after some inspection, we realized that it was we had lost a CV boot. Now, this is not a catastrophic failure. You can drive for a little while as long as there's some grease left in the joint there. But the problem was, when we arrived at in the Oregon area, the first thing we were going to do is do a track day. Now, a leaky CV boot axle, A, wouldn't pass tech, and B, having a CV with no grease in it at a track event, that is a recipe for disaster. So we were going to have to do something about this. Fortunately, we know people, and they're mostly pretty cool. Now, all these people are pretty cool, because between Wyoming and where we got to in the small town of Morrow, Oregon, my wife had made some calls. So she was navigating on this leg of the trip. I was driving. We do switch off, but this was her turn to sit in the passenger seat and make phone calls. But by the time we landed in Morrow, Oregon, the NSX community had rallied, and one person met us along the way at our next stop overnight and delivered to us the appropriate volume of transmission fluid that we were going to need, because we were going to have to pull the axle to institute a permanent fix. Now, we had stopped and gotten a split boot kit as a Band-Aid to just kind of clamp it over there to keep, hopefully, most of the rest of the grease in place while we limped our way on to our destination. But by the time we landed in Morrow, Oregon, we had the appropriate amount of transmission fluid had gotten to us. One of the Acura dealers in that region that was sponsoring the event, another club member, had gone and purchased a boot kit on our behalf, Honda part number, full boot kit on our behalf, and brought it over there. And then at the same time, a local who owns a machine shop and builds titanium bicycles, he had made it out there because he was helping to facilitate the track event the following day. But he rocked up with a set of quick jacks and a whole spare axle, thinking that would be quicker than trying to replace the boot. We then set to work in the parking lot of the Tall Winds Motel with sort of this motley crew of people doing this. And unfortunately, I brought enough stuff that I probably could have done. I did not carry a spare boot kit with me, but I do carry a toolkit because we're, anywhere we go, we're traveling long distances, and usually there's a track day involved. You can break stuff at a track, so I do carry a pretty robust toolkit with me in the NSX. So right now I've got it replacing the spare tire in the front of the car, and it's got more or less everything I could need. If I can't fix it with what I've got with me, it's probably going to need a flatbed anyway. And thus far in my ownership, that's more or less proven true. We got up there, and between the tools that I brought and then the very helpful assistance of having the quick jacks to get the car a little bit further off the ground, also just happened to be that the owner of Comptech Engineering, who builds has built numerous race NSXs, was in the area, and he brought some other stuff by, but then it was also just sort of there as supervision and moral support, which mostly equated to him drinking beer and then being like, "Oh yeah, you should do it this way instead." So we set to work on this. The Tall Winds Motel was very, very cool about this. I guess they're kind of used to that crowd. The only favor they asked of us was to not use the towels from the hotel room to clean up any axle grease. So we obliged them there, but otherwise set to work on this. Managed to get the axle swapped out, and probably we arrived mid-afternoon, had the axle swapped or axle pulled out, used the spare axle that the gentleman had brought rather than trying to reboot the existing axle, because that's another, it feels like a little bit of a literal can of worms, as much grease as you're having to deal with. We had the axle back on, and driving it around, we took a little shakedown run down the road and back by probably 8 in the evening. Then got up the next morning, rechecked the torque on a few of the key, critical bolts before heading over to the track and running 2 days at Oregon Raceway Park without further incident. From there, so we did the track event there, and then the rest of the NS Expo event was several, I would probably say a couple of 100 miles of scenic driving around the Mount Hood area. After which we then got a really cool invitation to go down to Monterey. It ended up being the unveiling of the 2022 NSX Type S, and that was an offer we couldn't refuse. So we drove from Oregon then back to Colorado, where we were obliged for a family occasion, and then we bought a emergency set of tires because we had calculated on doing the trip out and back on some half-used tires already. But then in Colorado, we realized that, like, no, these are the fronts in particular were getting a little bit iffy, and we were going to have to drive then back over the Rockies and down to Southern California to get to where we were going, and then all the way back home. So emergency set of tires, went to Monterey, saw the unveiling of the Type S, which is super cool, and then from there took the southern route back across the American Southwest back home to Tennessee. I think that trip totaled about 8,200 miles in more or less a sitting. And because the NSX community is awesome, we got to do all of that and didn't have to abort halfway through for a want of parts, tools, or other consumables.
When you get a ticket, it might look something like this, but the first thing that you need to do is take a picture of that ticket and send it to 305-305. That will get the ticket clinic on your case immediately. They've got brick and mortar offices in Georgia, Florida, and California, but they can help you find a ticket no matter where you get it in the United States by helping you find a local attorney that will do everything they can to help you avoid costly fines, insurance premium increases, points on your license, risk of suspension, even jail time. They've helped me out with this ticket and many others, and a lot of my friends as well. So check them out now at the link in the description below, or again, text your ticket to 305-305 to get the ticket clinic on your case. They are the perfect partner in your fight against any speeding ticket.